Hey, what's up everybody? 8-Bit Flashback here. Today I'll be testing out and reviewing the X15 PowKiddy Handheld Console. So this is an Android-based console running Game Machine Android 7.0 for the operating system. And I was actually very surprised with how many systems this is capable of emulating. With this handheld, you can play all kinds of games, ranging from 8-bit all the way to 128-bit games. You can play some of your favorite systems, such as Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Game Boy, PlayStation, Arcade, Nintendo 64, Sega Dreamcast, Sega Saturn, and more. So inside the box you're going to get the handheld console itself, a charging cable, and the manual. This does support a Wi-Fi connection, so you can jump on the internet or download various apps. It also supports Bluetooth. If you want to pair a Bluetooth controller, you can. And it has an HDMI output if you want to connect to your TV. Now let's go over some of the specifications. For the operating system, it is running Android 7.0. For the CPU, it has a MT8-163 quad-core 853 64-bit running at 1.3 GHz. For the memory, it has 32 GB of internal memory and 2 GB of RAM. For the display, it is 5.5-inch IPS screen with 1280 by 720p resolution and a touch panel that's 5-point touch. For the battery capacity, that is 3000 mAh, and I get about 4 to 5 hours gameplay time. And if you're curious about the handheld dimensions, it measures about 8 inches wide by 4 inches tall by 1 inch thick. And for the weight, it's about 9 ounces. Okay, let's take a closer look at the X15 PowKiddy Handheld Console. On the front here we have 4 action buttons. We have an A, X, Y, and B. We have a start, select, a gamepad button, and a power button. And this gamepad button allows you to configure some of the touchscreen controls. And on this side we have the volume control, plus and minus, the directional pad, and an analog thumbstick. And I would prefer this to be more of a traditional directional pad that was solid, but it still works pretty good. Then located on the top of the handheld, we got some more buttons here. We have the L1, L2, R1, R2. Then we have 2 full-size USB ports, an HDMI port, a headphone jack, a micro SD card slot, a power port, and a micro USB port. So this thing has all kinds of ports on it. And there is a couple different speakers located on the back of this handheld. And I really like the shape of this little handheld. It's got some nice curves that feel good when you're holding this in your hand. As far as the plastic goes, it's not a super thick plastic. It does feel kind of lightweight, but I think it's plenty good enough for a retro handheld gaming device like this. Now let's go ahead and turn up the sound so we can hear that. And it's got some pretty clean sound to it. So one thing I really like about this handheld is the fact that it has dual controls, meaning I can use the touchscreen to control the game, or I can use the physical controls, or I can use a combination of both of them. For instance, I can push the start button here, or I can just navigate with my directional pad here and select whatever I want. So let's go ahead and play this game here for just a few minutes. So here's a look at the home screen game menu, and there's 3 different categories. We have game platform, local game, and game simulator. And a lot of these apps I've either sideloaded or downloaded straight to this device. The apps that are on this to begin with, a lot of them I've deleted because they were Chinese based and they were hard to read the language obviously, so I installed the apps I wanted to kind of customize this to my needs. Originally this did come with an internet browser, but it was very hard to use because of the language barriers. So I ended up installing Google Chrome, and that works really well on this device. So with most of the apps that I currently have on this device right now, I got them on here by either using the Chrome browser and searching for the appropriate app, then downloading it directly to this device, or by using the Aptoide App Store. Now this is kind of like a generic Google Play, and there's a bunch of different apps on this that you can search for and install directly to this device. As far as trying to use the Google Play App Store on this device, it's probably not going to be very compatible because of this being an off-brand, and you can have better luck using something like what I'm using here. And just to let you know, this App Store application was not originally on this device. I did have to search for it using the Chrome browser, and it was able to install without any issue. And when you do install apps on this device, they will be located on the My Apps folder first, and from there you can move them to wherever you want on the home screen menu. Okay, let's go ahead and move down to Local Game. And all these games here are going to be Android-based games, so they're going to be in a .apk format designed for the Android operating system. Okay, let's move down one more folder. That's going to be the Game Simulator or emulators. And inside here I've installed a couple different emulators. We have Rycast, RetroArch, Arc Browser, and Yaba Sanshiro, which is going to be a Sega Saturn emulator. And there is one more item in here called the Happy Chick Games, which is going to be something that was already pre-installed on this device. And this is actually a real cool app. So the Happy Chick application has a bunch of different emulators that are already built in. Plus, it gives you access to a bunch of different games that you can download straight to this device. Now if we go to the top and select category, that will show us the built-in emulators and what's available. We have Arcade, PC Engine, Dreamcast, Neo Geo Pocket, Nintendo 64, MAME, Super Nintendo or Super Famicom, Mega Drive, Wonder Swan Color, MAME Plus, PSP, ONS, which I'm not familiar with, Nintendo DS, PlayStation, Game Boy Advance, Android, Famicom or NES, and Game Boy Color. So we have a bunch of different emulators we can choose from. Now most of these are pre-installed with this application, but there might be a few you have to download. I think the Nintendo DS, which is the Drastic emulator, I did have to download that separately, but most of these were already on here with the application. Now if you're looking to add some games to these emulators, it's real easy. There's quite a few games available for each one of these. So I'm going to select the Mega Drive or Sega Genesis right here. And that's going to pull up available games that I can download directly to this device and play them with this application. So let's go ahead and scroll through some of the games here and we'll find a game to try out. Let's try Gunstar Heroes. So I'm going to select Get over here and then download. So it's now done. So I'm going to go back to the main menu of this application and select Play here now at the bottom. And this will pull up all the games that I do have installed on this device. Now most of these I did download and install directly, but I do have a couple of these that are on my micro SD card. And if you want to add games to the micro SD card, you can push the local button right here. So when you push this local button right here, this will bring up this menu here that explains where the ROM directory should be and how the folder structure should look. After adding games to the appropriate folders, you can push the refresh button and the games will display over here. And let's go ahead and try out Gunstar Heroes, which I just put on here a few minutes ago. And you do have the option to play multiplayer. If someone else is on the same network with a similar device, you could play two-player using these options. But I'm just going to do single player. Alright, let's see how well this game plays. This is one of the more demanding games for the Sega Genesis. But this device should be able to handle Sega Genesis no problem. So it seems to be playing like it should. And one nice feature is I can use the directional pad to play, or I can use the analog stick, or I can use the touch screen. So I got a bunch of different options here. But I do prefer using the directional pad for this game. So with most of the emulators that you use with this application, there is a menu that you can access by pushing this icon right here. And this will bring up a menu with a bunch of different choices. Now the choices are going to be different depending on which emulator you're using. Some might have a save game feature and some might not. With this particular one, there is a save game feature. If we go to File and Create Archive, that will create a save point. Now if you want to go back to this save point at any time, all you have to do is access that menu again, go to File, and play the point where you save. So I'm going to select Play, and that takes me right back to where I was. Now I'm going to go ahead and exit, so I'm going to select quit, and that should take me back to the Happy Chicks game menu. So let's go and try a main game out now. We'll try Miss PacMan. Actually, this is main plus. And I'm going to try out the analog stick with this game. Seems to be working good. Go ahead and play here for just a few. So I don't see any issues here. It seems to be playing pretty smooth. Let's access that menu again. And it looks like you can create a save point with this emulator as well. So that's nice. Go ahead and quit. Now let's try out a PlayStation game. I'll try Metal Gear Solid.
Snake, there's an elevator there you can take up to the ground.
Here comes the elevator. If I can make it there without getting seen. Uh-oh. Crap! Oh, I gotta get around the corner and hide. So I ran 10 feet away. Let's see if that's good enough to hide from him. Ah, crap, he seen me again. Oh. Well, PlayStation seems to be playing pretty well. Let's go ahead and try something else out. Let's try some Nintendo DS, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Arcade Attack. So I'm actually rather surprised this is playing pretty smooth on this device using the Drastic emulator. Alright, let's go ahead and try a different game out. As you can see here, I do have a couple of Dreamcast games installed on the Happy Chick application, but as far as the emulation goes, it does have a better performance when I use the standalone Rycast emulator, which I'll be using here in a few. When trying to play these games on the Happy Chick application, the performance isn't quite as good, so we'll wait to play the Dreamcast games. So let's go ahead and try Killer Instinct Gold for the Nintendo 64, and I believe this is using the Mupen emulator. So as you can hear, the emulation's not quite 100%. This sounds a little bit off. So let's try some Mortal Kombat 4 for the Nintendo 64. So as far as the emulation goes, it's playing fairly well. I do hear a little bit of glitchiness with the sound. Alright, let's go and try something else. Now I'm going to try another Nintendo 64 game. Let's play some Ridge Racer 64. So it seems to be playable, but it's pretty choppy, making it not that fun to play. I'm going to try one more Nintendo 64 game out here. Let's try Spider-Man. It should be on here somewhere. So this game is plenty playable. It does have a couple of emulation glitches. If you look at the shadow, it's kind of glitching out there. But other than that, it's playing pretty smooth.
Forward reach the next building.
Okay, let's go ahead and try some more games out here. Try some Contra 3 for Super Nintendo. So it seems to be playing Super Nintendo no problem. Let's try something else out now. Let's try out a PSP game. Okay, so I'm trying out some Need for Speed. It seems to be playing okay, but I do notice there's a weird reflection on the car. It's like some sort of glitch with the emulator. I'm not sure what's causing that. It is a little bit choppy, so that's making it a little bit harder to steer, but I'd still say it's playable. Alright, let's test out some Game Boy Advance. We'll try Aladdin. So from what I can see here, it looks like the Game Boy Advance emulation is doing pretty good. Everything's running nice and smooth. Don't see any problems here. Let's play RoboCop 3 for the Famicom or NES. And it looks like it's playing the Famicom or NES games pretty well here. Okay, let's try something else. Now let's go ahead and test an arcade game out. We'll try Marvel vs. Capcom. So as far as I can see here, this arcade game seems to be playing really well. Alright, let's go ahead and try something else out here. Now let's go ahead and head back to the home screen. And we'll try out some different emulators here. So I have the Dreamcast emulator for Dreamcast and the Sega Saturn emulator, Yabba Sanshiro. Let's go ahead and try the Dreamcast first. So this is Mortal Kombat Gold for the Sega Dreamcast using the Dreamcast emulator. And I did have to do some special button mapping to get this to work, but it seems to be working now. So even though the frames per second isn't doing that great with this game, it seems to be playing okay. Alright, let's go ahead and try another Dreamcast game out here. So it seems to be doing a fairly decent job with the emulation here. It is running a little choppy because that frames per second drops once in a while, but overall I'd say it's playable. Alright, let's go ahead and try some Sega Saturn out now. Let's head over to the Yabba Sanshiro emulator. Let's go ahead and start off with some Panzer Dragoon. So to get the Sega Saturn games to play somewhat decent, I did have to go into the settings and change the rendering mode to original, and that made a huge difference, but it did lower the resolution. So as you can see here, the game is playable, but it does get a little choppy at times because of that frames per second dropping. But I think it's very impressive that Sega Saturn is working on this little handheld console. Alright, let's go ahead and try another Sega Saturn game out. Let's go ahead and give Gex a try here.
Lock and load, little lizard.
So as you can see here, this game is playing really well. The frames per second is staying nice and high, and it's playing nice and smooth.
Who opened the can of whoop-ass?
Now it's time for some of the pros and cons for the X15 PowKiddy Handheld Console. This thing can play a crazy amount of emulators, ranging from the 8-bit era all the way to the 128-bit era. And as far as the emulator performance goes, it does a pretty decent job with most of the emulators on this device. Now when you're trying to play systems such as the Dreamcast, Sega Saturn, or Nintendo 64, it might struggle a little bit. When you're picking games for those systems and the emulators, you want to pick games that are less demanding. If you're trying to play some games that are really 3D driven and more high demanding, then you're probably going to have a hard time trying to play those games on this device. But if you stick to those less demanding games, you might have pretty decent results. One thing I really like about this device is the touchscreen. I really like the functionality of that, plus the physical buttons. But I did notice once in a while when I'm trying to use the touchscreen, if I'm trying to touch certain items that are on the edge of the screen, it does seem to have a hard time registering when I'm trying to push those objects, and I have to push really hard to make it work. So that does get a little annoying, but overall, I still think the touchscreen is a huge plus for this handheld console. The multi-functionality of this device is huge. Not only can you play a crazy amount of games with this, but you can also browse the internet, download various different apps, and customize this to what you want. Okay, it is time for me to go. If you like this video, if you could, hit that like button, and have yourself a great day, and I'll see you next time.